design instead of actually focusing on content. They're bombarded with advertisements, and there's just so many wasted hours scrunched over looking at a screen.
So here's another one. This is Jennifer Zosh, a professor of human development and family studies at Penn State University, Brandywine. In 2022, she had a study that looked at 124 of the most popular ed apps, and she scored them out of 12 based on factors like active learning and engagement.
There was no one making sure that those things were really educational. It was essentially something that app developers could check off, and that was what parents had to go by. And basically, we just found that many, many apps scored pretty low. Even in paid apps, 50% of our sample scored in the lower quality range. And in fact, only 7 apps or 6% earned a total score greater than 8. So you really see that many, many of these apps were not doing what parents, I think, want them to do.
So Professor Zosh saying that basically only 6% of the ed apps she tested were high quality. Well, I'm joined today by Antero Garcia. He's an associate professor in the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University and president-elect of the National Council of Teachers of English. And Professor Garcia, I want to bring in another voice now. This is Adam Fayal. He's director of professional learning and leadership at the nonprofit All for Ed, and also former director of technology and media services at the Newton County School System in Georgia, where he also taught high school science. Adam, welcome to On Point.
Thank you for having me.
So that bite there from Professor Zosh was very interesting to me because, you know, it's pretty grim, her assessment of ed apps in general. What can you tell us about the process by which some of these apps are decided on or brought into districts or schools? Is there any kind of vetting that usually happens?
Yeah, there is. I think most places have some type of process, whether you're talking about the procurement process, where you have the stakeholders involved, where you do have your superintendents, your curriculum directors, your technology directors, and teachers to pilot and go through some of these platforms. But unfortunately, there is this dark side of the game, if you will, where you do have vendors that know how to get around that system, if you will, and cozy up to the right person and kind of get into a district before that process. So in some cases, you have situations where the stage is already set for this vendor to already be the primary source that they're going to use in that system.
And for the apps also, it seems like these days almost every app that you pay for works on a subscription model, right? Is that what's happening in edtech as well?
Oh, definitely. We're seeing that happening more and more. It's not you buy it, you own it. It's you renting the service. And with that being said, the schools, in some cases, aren't really holding those vendors accountable for what they have said this product is designed to do. If you're designed to get the desired outcome, how are you holding that vendor accountable for the outcome that they sold you that the product can do?
I mean, canceling your subscription would be my answer.
Exactly.
But to be honest, is it easy for schools to do that or hard?
You know, it's very challenging because ultimately, and not to make excuses, they're juggling a lot of different components. So when you look at a tech product that's supposed to do something, if we have it, we've been able to check that box off and move to what other fire we have to put out within the school system. And they've kicked that can down the road to whoever's responsible for that program. So if it's a science platform, okay, science people, you look through it and make sure it's good. And at some point, they just get to it where it's like, all right, well, we still need the platform. We haven't really had a chance to evaluate it. Let's just sign the purchase order and renew it again for next year.
Mm-hmm. You said kick the can down the road. That's also an analogy that Professor Garcia has used in general about sort of the overall approach that education is taking to technology. I mean, earlier the professor was talking about how these were the same kind of questions that were being asked when he was in the classroom 20 years ago. I mean, why do you think that we're still sort of grappling with some fundamentals about how to use tech in schools, Adam?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to something that Katie mentioned earlier. We really have not had the real hard conversations about changing what teaching and learning looks like and what our curriculum looks like as it relates to technology. Because really and truly, if you're going to use technology at a high level, your curriculum should dictate the need for said technology. And our technology and our instructional practices, by and large, haven't really changed across the board. And so teachers and educators are kind of shoehorning in technology to make it fit. In some cases, they're feeling pressure from these administrators that have spent countless dollars on said technology. So they're telling our educators, hey, figure out a way to make it work. So you do have your teachers who are figuring those things out, but I always look at technology as a great amplifier. It's going to amplify those great practices, those teachers who already have those great connections, it's going to amplify that work. But if they're already struggling with classroom management and other things, it's just going to amplify those things that are already happening in the classroom.
Yeah, amplify the good and the bad. I totally take your point on that. Professor Garcia, let me bring you back in here. I want to take a huge step back for a second because sometimes I see technology as in education as a great red herring almost, because it does nothing, absolutely nothing that I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, to address the fundamental causes of disparate outcomes in American schools, right? Talking about poverty, we're talking about lack of access to opportunities, we're talking about funding, we're talking about the things that have always plagued American education and therefore plagued students in terms of like the opportunities they have to learn. And tech doesn't do a thing for that. So, I mean, to Adam's point, we just sort of, that's the same hamster wheel over and over again.
That's right. I mean, I would go one step further and add, not only does it not address these topics, but I actually think in many ways it exacerbates it, right? And so I'll offer two ways to think about that. So one is we can go back to the pandemic. I think that's kind of been a looming shadow in this conversation. And during the pandemic, one of the metaphors some of my colleagues and I have written about is that, this was the same storm, but weathered through different ships, right? And so we had, everybody was jumping on Zoom and Google Classroom in order to, engage in this powerful transformational moment in education. And many kids, right, depending on socio-political contexts, were Zooming into classrooms where they were in a room with 3 or 4 other siblings, right? All trying to Zoom into different classrooms at the same time, right? What an awful way to try to learn on top of the existing challenges, right? Yeah. Another way to think about this is if we think of kind of edtech policies where we're banning devices, we're essentially the only places where you learn those kinds of spaces, those kinds of practices in working environments are in service level jobs like working at McDonald's, right? Those are places where you're not allowed to have your cell phone out when you're serving customers. Otherwise, right, we're essentially preparing kids through these edtech policies for working class jobs, while other kinds of school contexts are essentially allowing kids to think about ways to thrive beyond this. And so, we have these kind of much more holistic classrooms that are offered for, much wealthier young people. And the relationships between technology vary vastly. And so it's not only that the technology hasn't quote unquote fixed these issues of divisive context of what's happening in America, but they've exacerbated it.
Yeah, no, I completely take your point. I mean, and the disparities that were revealed by the pandemic were and still continue to be shocking and dismaying. I remember we did a show about educational access during the pandemic, and we spoke to a mom they did not have any internet access in their home. So he had a laptop given to him by the school, but the only way he could actually log into school while they were remote learning was to stand out on a street corner and get the Wi-Fi out there on the street corner. So, okay, you mentioned that there's a socioeconomic aspect to it here. That brings me, Professor Garcia and Adam, to an article that was actually printed in the New York Times back in 2018, so a long time ago, but I have never forgotten it. It was an article that talked to Silicon Valley executives about their personal use in their families about the education and technology. And the takeaway from it was a lot of people making these very apps, making these very devices, do not even let their own kids use them that often at home or even at school. Part of the article was about a great race for Silicon Valley executives to get their kids into Waldorf schools, where there's no tech at all. And one of the execs said something interesting. He said, our job is to make using these apps and these devices as intuitive as possible. So we're not worried about that. What we're worried about is, do kids learn fundamentals that make them better thinkers? And to that point, there's a little clip here from Matthew Mengerink, who's a technologist and former executive at places like Uber, YouTube, and eBay. And in 2012, he and his wife, Elaine, spoke to CNN about why they're taking a no-tech approach with their children.
If I go back to my education as a computer scientist, we didn't have computers in the classroom. We had algorithms, and we had logic, and we had textbooks. And we were working through that and really trying to understand the science behind the computer.
Our homes are so filled with technology that they're going to be exposed. They're sponges, they soak it up. But in the classroom, you need to be learning the basics. You want them interacting with their peers, learning how to get along with each other.
So that was back in 2012. Adam File, what do you think about this? The very people making this stuff, some of them don't want it used in the classrooms where their kids are.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they said that, because I'm also listening to that as they're coming from a place of privilege also, where she mentioned, oh, well, our kids have this in the home and they'll see it all the time. That's not the reality for all students. As you mentioned, the student needing the laptop from the school and also being out on the corner to get internet access, I'm fairly sure that student won't see technology in their home all the time, and it will not be ubiquitous with their life. So it's one of those things where it's a two Americas kind of conversation we still need to have with that not all students get access and get exposure. And unfortunately or fortunately, school is looked at as that equalizer to provide those opportunities for students to get access to technology and learn the skills that some of their more affluent peers will not get. So they don't necessarily have that luxury to say, oh, well, we're going to put our technology down in school and do something different, because if they do, they'll fall even further behind their peers.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to end with some positive examples from both of you, if I could. I mean, because the big question is, like, how do we get this right? Tech is here to stay. I get that. I mean, Adam, do you have like an example of a successful implementation of an app in classrooms?
Yeah, and what I've seen with those successes is districts really having the conversation ahead of time about what does success look like for implementation of this product. Is it we want our students to have more authentic writing behind this writing tool that we're using, more engaging writing, not necessarily tying it directly to a state assessment or a NAEP score, but looking and seeing, are your students getting more involved in that tool? Are they more engaged in the classroom? Are their teachers feeling more confident in their instructional practices using those tools? Setting those indicators going in and those look-fors are going to be key to having success, and then being able to turn around and renew or continue to purchase whatever platform or products that you have.
So essentially setting up their own criteria and testing to see if those apps meet that criteria as you go along. Okay. And Professor Garcia, same question to you. What would a successful implementation look like?
You know, one of the words that Adam used earlier was amplify, and I think that's a really powerful use here to think about powerful tools, right? So some of the ways that I've seen this really work is when we get to amplify what students are able to do. I did some research with kids on school buses, and they were able to measure the sound quality the level of sound on the bus, how loud it was in different parts of the bus and then different parts of their school bus journey, and use that data to really get a new picture of what their school journey was like and the kinds of relationships that kids have. Similarly, I work with with adults and young people who are labeled undocumented in this country, and we use online tools to amplify their voices to try to reshift the narrative around what being undocumented looks like and the invisible costs. I've worked with teachers across the country to place young people in conversation from different time zones, from different kinds of socio-political perspectives. And in doing that, you get these really kind of beautiful ways that young people are able to come together using digital tools, but to have human-centered conversations. And I think that's where the real success lies with these devices.
Well, Antero Garcia is associate professor in the Graduate School of Education at Stanford and president-elect of the National Council of Teachers of English, author of Good Reception, Teens, Teachers, and Mobile Media in a Los Angeles High School. Professor Garcia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Adam File, Director of Professional Learning and Leadership at the nonprofit All for Ed, joining us from Covington, Georgia. Adam, thank you so very much.
And you're listening to KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. I'm Zeki Hamid. I'm here with Casey Martin, and we're here to take a couple of minutes of your day to let you know about something really important that happened last night, which is that Congress voted to end all funding for public media. So currently that's about 5% of KUOW's budget, and that's what comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And what does that mean in terms of real money? That's about $1.4 million that we will lose annually as a result of Congress's actions last night. So now we're here asking for your help to raise $1.4 million to keep us going strong and help us plan for the future, which is a future without CPB support. This is new for us, but it is not something that we can't do because we can do hard things. Mm-hmm. This is what this community is about. This is what KUOW is about. And together, we know we can raise this money to keep this service going. So give right now to keep us going. Go to KUOW.org and set up a monthly donation.
Yeah, this wasn't a complete surprise. This is something that's been talked about and discussed for a long time in D.C. And here in public radio, just kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop of when it would be final. And, to read the news this morning, has made things very serious, here at KUOW. And we know that listeners and donors are taking it seriously as well. We want to thank a group of generous donors who have pledged $700,000 of matching funds. Half of that $1.4 million goal that we need to raise and to be ready for this moment. Update this morning, Zeki, we have already raised more than $550,000 this morning. That is from 2,100 donors. That's 2,100 people we want to thank so very much who have taken that next step, gone to KUOW.org, and they're doing their part to help us reach this goal. That dollar for dollar match means when you give to KUOW right now, your donation will be doubled. So choose an amount that is right for you, and then it will be doubled. KUOW.org. Please do it right now.
And by the way, we are here addressing a short-term problem, but the long-term solution is monthly giving. Our short-term budget gap is real and it is serious. However, this challenge won't be solved with just one successful fundraising drive. Yep. The CPB was really, the way you can look at it, is the largest sustaining donor that we've had, and we will need ongoing support to fill that gap left by this vote. So the best thing that you can do right now is become a monthly donor. I'm a monthly donor, and it feels great to give to something that I believe in so much, and I know that it feels great for a lot of you out there to do the same thing. So the best thing to do right now is pick a number that fits your budget. Could be $10, $20, $50, $100 a month, and you can go to KUOW.org and give that support and keep this service going.
And a huge thank you to everyone that has supported KUOW and public broadcasting today. A few people to thank this morning. I want to thank Lynn, who writes in, saving our democracy with enlightened reporting. Thank you, Lynn, so very much. Daniel in Bellingham, who listens to us on KQOW, writes in that this is the background soundtrack to my day, keeping me up to date locally, nationally, and intergalactically. I like that news from out of this world. Jim on Bainbridge Island writes in, thank you for the truthful and honest news and the other shows that help me keep informed and educated. You are a mainstay of my day. Thank you so very much, Jim. We're able to be there. We are able to be there on your dial, on your streaming device. We're able to do that because of listener support. Thank you so very much to those three who have gone to KUOW.org, and you can join them right now.
That's right. And just to recap, Congress has voted to end all funding for public media, but we can make up this gap thanks to you. All donations are going to be matched to up to $700,000, and we reach our goal. We will get back to regular programming. Folks, it has been a pleasure being here with you for the past few hours. A Week in Review is next. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. This hour, President Trump is putting his stamp on a landmark bill that would govern digital currency. The Genius Act consists of new regulations for stablecoins. It's a type of cryptocurrency linked to a stable asset, such as the U.S. dollar, to guard against price volatility. Republican leaders in Congress are hitting pause on a Russian sanctions bill that has drawn overwhelming bipartisan support from dozens of lawmakers. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports some sponsors say they need to move fast to finally force a ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine.
Amid souring relations between President Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin, GOP leaders are following Trump's lead on sanctions. House Speaker Mike Johnson says that means having patience.
We're doing this in a one-team approach, and we're not going to get in front of the White House on that. We're going to trust the State Department and the Commander-in-Chief to get that done, so we'll see how that works out.
But some co-sponsors of the Sanctioning Russia Act, like Nebraska GOP Congressman Don Bacon, say time is running out.
By giving those sanctions, we show the president there's overwhelming support to do it.
For now, they'll let Trump give Putin 50 days to reach a deal or face stiff penalties. Claudia Grisales, NPR News.
2 senior Christian leaders are in Gaza today to visit a Catholic church which was hit by Israel's military this week. 3 Palestinians died in that attack, which Israel's military said was caused by a stray munition. Here's NPR's Emily Fang.
Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa is the Vatican's most senior official in the Holy Land. He and his Greek Orthodox counterpart, the Patriarch Theophilus III, were in Gaza on Friday visiting and consoling parishioners of the Holy Family Catholic Church there. That's the church whose congregation the former Pope Francis used to call each night, and where 3 people were killed in an Israeli strike on Thursday earlier this week. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed Israel's, quote, deep regret that the church was hit. He spoke by telephone with Pope Leo Friday morning as outrage over the deadly strike mounted. Pope Leo on the call urged a ceasefire in Israel's war with Hamas and expressed his concern over Gaza, whose people, he said, were, quote, paying an agonizing price. Emily Fang, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Authorities in Brazil worry that the former far-right president Jair Bolsonaro is a flight risk, are imposing new restrictions on his movements. NPR's Carrie Kahn reports Bolsonaro must wear an electronic ankle monitor and cannot communicate with foreign ambassadors or approach embassies.
The tough surveillance was ordered by Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, who also banned Bolsonaro from using social media and communicating with other defendants in his ongoing criminal case. That includes his son, Eduardo, who's in exile in the U.S. Bolsonaro says he never had plans to leave Brazil and is suffering, quote, supreme humiliation.
It's NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
And good morning. Happy Friday. My name's Gabriel Spitzer. I'm in today for Bill Radke hosting Week in Review. But before we get into the program today, we need to give you a little bit of an update on news that happened overnight. Last night, Congress voted to end all funding for public broadcasting. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been KUOW's biggest sustaining funder. So this will cost us $1.4 million a year here at KUOW, including this year. But with the support of listeners like you, KUOW will continue. You can give now at KUOW.org. And I want to say welcome to our newscaster, news queen extraordinaire, Paige Browning, who's joining me this morning. Hey, Paige.
Thanks, Gabriel. Hey there. And here is some good news. So far this morning, we've raised more than $560,000 toward this gap that Gabriel mentioned, $1.4 million. And that's come in from 2,200 donors. Wow. And here's some more good news. KUOW has been preparing for this moment. So a group of generous donors have already pledged $700,000 in matching funds, half of what we need to raise to be ready for this moment when Congress voted to end funding for public broadcasting. So when you give to KUOW right now, today, your donation is going to be doubled. Double your impact towards our goal. Give now at KUOW.org.
That's right. Last night, that vote was an unprecedented threat to public broadcasting here in the United States. We have not actually confronted something of quite of this magnitude before. We have been anticipating it. We've been planning for it. We have been hoping it wouldn't happen. But here we are in any case. So the time to support KUOW is now. Make a sustaining gift at KUOW.org. Thank you so much to everyone who's given already, and stay tuned for some Week in Review. And here we are. Welcome to Friday, and welcome to Week in Review. I am Gabriel Spitzer, in today for Bill Radke, and of course, each week we gather to process the news together, to take that fire hose of reporting and make some sense out of it with some people who are clever and thoughtful, such as political and tech consultant and author of the Rendezvous newsletter, Ron Davis, KUOW Soundside producer Maleeha Syed, and former Washington State Attorney General Rob McKenna. Welcome aboard, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
All
Thanks.
right. And don't forget, you can always follow along with the conversation on YouTube. You can just look for KUOW Week in Review. You can see all those secret messages that I blink in Morse code throughout the broadcast. You can see Rob McKenna's face tattoos, all kinds of bonus features. Lots of stuff there for you on YouTube. But first, let's take a look at our first news story from last week. So we're seeing another seeming escalation this week in the federal government's push to crack down on immigration. So 9 people were arrested on federal charges related to a June 11th protest in Spokane. They include a former Spokane City Council member who led the protest against detention of 2 legal immigrants. The protesters had tried to block the movement of some ICE vehicles that were transporting detainees, and that's led to charges of conspiracy to impede or injure law enforcement and assault on a federal officer. It's worth noting that the protesters were already arrested and booked by local authorities the night of the protests, along with like 20 others. And these are new federal charges on top of those. So, Ron, maybe we could start with you. We've been seeing a lot of back and forth on immigration. Is this actually a significant escalation?
It's part of a significant escalation. Like by itself, it's not its own escalation. It is a part of a increasing, and I would say moving towards systematic attempt to chill opposition, right? I mean, they're using the law, and they are using the law, right? Conspiracy, obstruction, these are real laws, but they are using them and weaponizing them in ways that are sort of new to the populace, new to the broader populace anyway, in terms of how this can be used to chill speech, to cow opposition, to make people scared. So what I would just add is, like, for instance, for a long time, legal scholars have said, hey, conspiracy plus prosecutorial discretion has caused us to make, we spent a bunch of time in the 80s and 90s putting, somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who committed a crime in jail through the chains of conspiracy, and for long periods of time. And this really disrupted mostly communities where black men lived. And many people have complained about this for a long time. Now we're seeing it weaponized in a different way, where ICE agents who intermittently are kidnapping innocent civilians and sending them to foreign or local or domestic gulags are being opposed somewhat vigorously, and we're finding out that the law is on the side of the kidnappers.
Thank you so much. Rob McKenna, our actual legal expert. What do you make of the charges and the legal justifications for them? Do you think that this will hold up?
Well, first, let's talk about the what we call the procedural posture of the case. What we're talking about now is a grand jury indictment that was handed down on July 9th in the U.S. District Court for Eastern Washington against the 9 defendants. So that means that the grand jury has seen evidence presented to them by the prosecution, the U.S. attorney, and has concluded that there was adequate evidence to move forward and to issue the grand jury indictment for, quote, using force and threats against federal agents to, quote, impede the transport of federal detainees to their immigration hearings in Tacoma. So what's happening is you have 2 detained individuals who are going to be bussed over to, or at least initially bussed over to Tacoma, to the federal detention center. And then there's a charge related to coercing the release, whatever that means, of the detainees. So I think Ron's right. When you start to see conspiracy woven into the charges, that it's a step up from what you might otherwise expect, which is obstruction or citation for blocking a public road or what have you. They're definitely turning up the heat using federal legal process. And the fact that it's a federal court's a big deal, right? This is not state court. This is the feds. And it does seem to be intended to send a message to people who decide not just to stand on the sidewalk and wave a sign and yell, like, we don't think these people should be moved to Tacoma, but to actually try to physically interfere. They're stepping up the heat on people who are thinking about that kind of activism.
Yeah. And Rob, can you just say a little bit more about how this differs from, in your opinion, our tradition of civil disobedience?
Well, it's not different in the sense that when you choose to disobey the law, so when you choose to physically obstruct a law enforcement officer who's attempting to do her or his job, you're putting yourself at risk of prosecution, right? This is what Dr. King and Gandhi instructed, is like, you can civilly disobey, you can block a street, you better be prepared for the consequences. So that this activity is part of that tradition. What we're seeing now is stronger charges being brought. This whole I can't remember the last time we saw a grand jury used to indict people who'd already been arrested by local authorities.
Yeah. Maleeha, I wonder what you sort of make of this. There's obviously prosecutors have a lot of choices that they can make in terms of how they go after or address this kind of law breaking. What did you make of the decisions that led to this outcome here in Spokane?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I noticed was this kind of feels like it fits into this bigger conversation that we're having about protesting across the country and what's fair game under the First Amendment. We were talking a little bit about our rights to protest and how people can civically disobey something that's happening. But then I think in recent years especially, we've seen a lot of people in the public talk about how those methods don't work and they don't feel like that prompts a reaction. So I can't speak too clearly on the legal implications, but I think more broadly, it's interesting to me that we're having this escalation happen between both the public and these prosecutors.
Mm-hmm. So it's not a one-sided escalation here.
Right. And there's something interesting. I guess I want to clarify this. So it sounds like one of the things that happened was police deployed the smoke canister into the crowd, and then one of the defendants returned it, essentially. And that was one of the accusations that
returned it like through the air.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it wasn't handing it back.
Didn't put it in the mail. Yeah.
I'm sorry, did you lose this?
And that person has been charged with some kind of assault-related charges. I don't remember the exact term of it, right?
He was accused of throwing a, quote, deployed incendiary device. So the device was deployed by the police, and he threw it back at them.
Right.
Which I think should cause us to recognize the asymmetry and the hypocrisy, right? I throw the canister because you're in my way, and it's a problem. You throw it back, and it's assault. I would also just add, in a different world, and we're not in that world, but in a different world, we have a set of laws that allow us, say, to protect ourselves or others, and be somewhat physical about protecting ourselves or others if we think that they're getting kidnapped. But as soon as you slap a badge and actually hide the badge and cover yourself with a mask and say ICE, now you've got the imprimatur of the law on your side. And this creates a real gap, I think, between what we consider to be common sense and moral and what is actually legal.
Yeah.
It's a critique of the legal system itself.
Rob McKenna, I just saw this morning more news of a protest in Cincinnati that involved that led up to a whole bunch of arrests, including arrests of journalists being charged with things like rioting. Are these kinds of federal charges something we're likely to see more of?
I think we will, because it appears that the U.S. attorneys are being instructed by the Department of Justice to take stronger action against protesters who, allegedly have stepped over the line. So we're going to see more of this, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty much the promise, right, of the Trump administration coming in and Kash Patel with the FBI and Bondi that the Justice Department would be used for political ends.
And that is what appears to be the case, according to a lot of advocates. Well, we'll be obviously keeping an eye on that story.
Well, yeah, okay, according to a lot of advocates, but let me just play the other side
Please,
of that.
no, go ahead.
I mean, law enforcement feels a little bit differently about it. So they're saying finally this is just the way they will put it, all right? They'll say someone is finally stepping up to protect our interests, to prevent us from being harmed. One of the indictments is against a defendant who's accused of striking an officer in the back of the head. So they're saying, finally something will happen if someone steps over the line and takes physical course of action. And so that's their view of it.
Wouldn't that person have probably gotten charged in other scenarios if they had actually struck an officer?
Yeah, they could be charged locally under state law, but they struck a federal officer, which makes them liable under federal law.
Yeah.
I mean more the direction from the Justice Department.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean,
I see what you're getting at.
I will be your retribution sort of theme of the Trump campaign.
Very clear theme, yes.
All right, well, moving on to another sort of prosecutorial discretion case. Not really, but something similar. This is one of these stories that kind of gets at whether Seattle's reputation for tolerance and free expression is more than skin deep. So this week, a King County judge ordered the city to create a plan to end public nudity at a Seattle beach. Denny Blaine Park has been a mainstay and a refuge for decades for LGBTQ folks, and specifically for those who really prefer to feel the breeze. But neighbors say this park is not just about nudity and about free spirits. This is more like a free-for-all for public sex acts and other lewd behavior. It's been a really long battle, but but this week could mark the beginning of the end for Seattle's most famous nude beach. Maleeha, what jumps out to you about these developments? I know you've been following the story.
I did. I pitched this last time, and every time I come on, I keep talking about Denny Blaine. I think the thing that really stood out to me is that the law about nudity, there is some ambiguity, but generally you can be nude as long as you're not making someone uncomfortable. I think the returned, there was some indication that they will kind of determine if nudity as constituted is okay in the park. And that level of ambiguity is what jumped out to me.
Yeah, that was an interesting revelation to me, that nudity on its own is not illegal. It has to be a public nuisance or actually harming somebody. I understand, Rob McKenna, you used to be in the neighborhood. Is that right? Do I have that right?
I was one of the fully clothed people, but
so you say.
No fun.
I know. I'm sticking by that story, though. So we lived just up the hill from Denny Blaine Park for 6 years, loved the area, loved all the parks. We visited many of them. So there's a string of parks along that shore of Lake Washington from 520 all the way down to below I-90. And, we would go down to Denny Blaine Park, and we discovered pretty early on it was popular on warm days for people who prefer to be unclothed. And that was fine. It didn't seem to be creating a problem. We would not typically hang out there at that point because we were clothed and we felt like we kind of stood out in an awkward way.
So you guys were embarrassed.
It was well. I mean, I really felt exactly. So at that time, the people living around there seemed to coexist just fine. Things apparently started changing in about 2023. And we know people who live in that area still, who actually live a lot closer to the park than we did. And they said things started to change, and they started to observe from their kitchen windows and bedroom windows and whatnot, lewd behavior. So what's happened in this case is that a court has ruled that the nudity has become a public nuisance. Now, nudity per se is not a public nuisance. But under the law of public nuisance, when it interferes with someone else's enjoyment of their property, and here the accusations are, sex acts and other lewd behavior, then it can become a public nuisance, which is an old concept of the common law that the judge applied in this case. So this does not mean that nudity has to be ended, outright. However, it's the actions by people who are taking advantage of that which has created the public nuisance. And so they might decide they have to, at least temporarily, prohibit all nudity in order to get on top of the nuisance that's been created by a minority of people.
I see. Okay, interesting. So, Ron Davis, I'm curious, how you see this story. Is this a story about public disorder and the rule of law, or is this more about sex and morality? Is this about queerness? Is it about NIMBYism?
I think it's about who's most important and what trade-offs we make there. And I think in this case, we're saying the risks of some bad thing happening are so high that the wealthy neighbors need to be able to see this shut down, and that's more important than this sort of safe space for LGBTQ people. I think some important context here. This park was a matter of some controversy a couple of years ago. I think KUOW wrote about the fact that there was a rich donor that was texting with the mayor, and there was an effort to put a playground in to sort of preempt the existence of this public nudity. There has been a sort of behind-the-scenes campaign to do this. Many people have felt that this is an attack on LGBTQ safety in a city that has been traditionally very welcoming to it. I think the key here, the analogy I couldn't help but see here is police abolitionism and police accountability, right? We have tools right now for rooting out this bad behavior. People can be arrested for those lewd acts. And do you use the tools to deter the specific behavior and still allow the nudity, or do you abolish the whole thing to start over? And I couldn't help but notice the funny, ironic flip in terms of you've got, essentially folks who are more conservative moving toward sort of a whole cloth abolitionist picture, right? Whereas on the other side of the ledger, when we're talking about police, it's, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, I'm not an abolitionist. I'm actually a reformist myself, but it just struck me as ironic.
So again, this is a question of whether you go after the so-called bad apples or whether you change the whole paradigm, right? Maleeha, what are your thoughts on particularly like this whole sort of NIMBY and kind of class angle to this story? It's obvious it's been part of it from the beginning, it seems like. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting to me, the connection between, nudity and masturbation. That feels like a pretty seamless one-to-one. But nudity and drug use, I don't really understand how those two are connected.
That's another allegation that there's unchecked public drug use. In this park.
Yes. And I'm thinking about other events like the Solstice Parade, for example, in Fremont. There's a naked bike ride every year. I just wonder sort of where nudity is okay and why.
Yeah, we don't seem like we get big public pushback against the bare butts on bikes thing that happens every year. So who knows?
You also don't get public pushback on the nudity on some of the other beaches along that stretch of Lake Washington. There's one that's much more secluded. It's south of Denny Blaine Park, and you have to hike down a trail. And I never visited it, but my neighbors said they took their grandchildren down there, and they said, "Oops," and they turned around and walked back, and they walked back up to the street to the boulevard. But that there don't seem to be complaints about that beach, which is more secluded. Screened off from the street by trees, perhaps screened off from the neighbors who can't see it. And so it really comes down to whether the nuisance is being created or not. I mean, indecent exposure is a legal concept, and it's because we don't want to be, pardon my pun, exposed to that, right?
Yeah.
So it's the actions that are occurring. And I agree with Ron that the real question is, can we enforce? So nudity is okay, but indecent exposure and the other sex acts not okay, because this doesn't just affect the people who live right around there. Although just for curiosity, I went on Redfin and I saw a lot of the houses around that park are for sale now. Maybe they'll be sold to nudists. I don't know. But it struck me that those people are fed up and leaving. But it isn't just affecting them; it's affecting anyone who might want to use a public park. And not just because of the nudity, because if you can use the park and not see the nudists, if you stand on the upper part, there's a retaining wall that drops down to the beach. And if you stand on the parking lot and the retaining wall side, you actually can't see them, right? But otherwise, you're not going to want to use that park. And so what right do some people who want to engage in these acts have to engage in behavior which precludes other people from using the park? It is a public space, after all.
Well, Rob, you mentioned that there's this other more secluded area, which is sort of how I think about, like, if I think about nude beaches to the extent they exist in this country, I imagine they're off, out of sight generally. Do you have a sense of how common it is for like a big city like Seattle to have a nude beach that's kind of right there in the neighborhoods?
I don't know of any other cities that have one right in the neighborhood. And I've lived in San Francisco on the Presidio, and I've lived in Munich, and at the Presidio down below the cliff on the west side of the Golden Gate, there's a beach called Baker Beach, very famous, and a part of Baker Beach is a long-time nude beach, very beloved by the LGBTQ community, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. And if you start by hiking over, if you start from another part of the beach and walk down where the nude portion is, all right, it's fine. And I never observed anyone engaging in any lewd behavior there. It was fine, and no one had a problem with it. So people have to police themselves. And similarly in Munich, Germany, the big Central Park for a long time has had a lot of nudity. And I haven't been there a lot, but the one time I was there, I didn't observe any bad behavior, just people who were naked. So, okay, that's fine. So it really comes down to how people behave. And it raises to me a really interesting question about social norms. It's like, if the people who want to be in a park and want to be nude want to continue to have the right, do they have any kind of moral obligation to say to people who are behaving badly, hey, stop that, because you're threatening everyone else's ability to be here by engaging in activity which is society believes should not be performed in public?
I think if that person is their friend, perhaps that's true. But I know I personally wouldn't feel comfortable approaching someone in the middle of a sex act in a public place and saying, hey, stop that. And I'm not sure that that's a fair obligation to put on people to say, like, hey, we want you to have this safe space, but only if you police these things that we would normally send an armed officer to do. My thought here just sort of comes back to that we don't have a constitutional right to be nude, but I'm going to use constitution law as an analogy here. In constitutional jurisprudence, one of the questions that's often asked when a right is at issue is this intervention narrowly tailored in addressing the problem? And I think here, although it's not a constitutional right, we are and should be very sensitive to the you call it free speech, free association, free expression rights of a community that has historically been very much oppressed. And so I think we should be thinking in terms of narrow tailoring, and this looks very, very different.
And we did for a long time, because you could be down there and be nude. It was not a problem. But it's a problem for law enforcement. I agree with you that, by the way, it'd be hard for individuals, but not impossible for people to signal like, hey, come on, this is our space, don't mess it up, right? I mean, there are ways that we routinely signal to each other what's appropriate behavior or what is not.
And I'm not sure that they're not right now.
I don't know either. Yeah. And I think some of this behavior is occurring off hours, et cetera. But anyway, it's become a greater and greater problem. But it's an enforcement problem. So when you think about alcohol, for example, we prohibit drinking in parks, even though it's entirely feasible that people could show up with a beer and have a beer and there's absolutely no problem. But because we've learned that can spin into a bigger problem with people coming out with a case of beer and then 10 friends and 10 cases of beer. We just don't allow alcohol in parks, right?
I feel like because the causal nexus is clear there, right? The beer causes people, or alcohol causes people to lose inhibition. Nudity doesn't cause people to masturbate.
Totally.
Right?
No, I agree with that. It's a line drawing. It's just a line drawing issue. I'm saying the way the law works, sometimes we draw lines. That's all I'm saying.
And we could talk about nudity all day, but we are going to take a brief break, and
topic.
We'll be back with more stories of the week coming up in just a few minutes. But before we do that, we are going to take a couple of moments to remind folks about a news story that happened overnight last night. Last night, Congress voted to end all funding for public media, and that affects about $1.4 million that had been allocated for KUOW. Again, this is money that had already been approved and that folks were, planning on how to use. That money has now been clawed back. It is a really important and crucial moment for supporters of public media to show their support now. We're asking folks to go and help us fill that $1.4 million hole by going to KUOW.org and setting up a monthly donation. I'm here now with KUOW's Paige Browning to talk a little bit more about why this is such an important moment for folks to show their support.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And the good news, Gabriel, is and for our listeners, is KUOW has been preparing for this moment. A group of generous donors has already pledged $700,000 in matching funds to be ready for today. $700,000. So that means when you give to KUOW right now, your donation will be doubled. Today may feel overwhelming learning of this news. I feel overwhelmed by the loss of $1.1 billion in public media funding nationwide. I also feel overwhelmed by the immense support that you, our listeners, have shown us today. The way to deal with this overwhelm is to take action. Share this information with your friends, become a monthly donor, and keep listening. Listen to KUOW, listen to the station from your hometown if you're not from here. Keep staying informed, and you can give now at KUOW.org.
Yeah, it really is. It can be so easy to sort of lose track of what difference we can make as things are changing so quickly. And it's easy to feel powerless and feel sort of buffeted by all these forces that are so much bigger than us. This is a situation where you actually can take an action to make a difference. If you go to KUOW.org, you make a gift, especially a gift on a sustaining basis, you are helping to sort of take over that burden that has been carried by the federal government for more than 50 years. KUOW, of course, has been here for almost 75 years, and you are helping to carry that mission forward by going to KUOW.org and making your gift. Our station pays more than $2 million a year for programs like Here and Now and Radiolab and Marketplace. That stuff costs money, and that's in addition to things like Week in Review and Soundside and all the local investments in local journalism that we make. The funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has helped pay for those programs all throughout the history of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And we want to keep bringing you these programs. So your support is what can make that possible. You can go to KUOW.org, pick a level of giving that's right for you, and thank you so much for all of your support.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com. And from Seattle Chamber Music Society, Kenji Lopez Alt and James Ennis host Tasting Notes, an event pairing live music with culinary craft, featuring chefs Renee Erickson, Lee Kindell, Kevin Smith, and more. July 25th at Benaroya Hall. Tickets and info at seattlechambermusic.org.
Hey, it's Week in Review. I'm Gabriel Spitzer in for Bill Radke this week. Today we are chewing over the week's news with KUOW's Maleeha Syed, political consultant Ron Davis, and former Washington Attorney General Rob McKenna. So, friends, violent crime is way down in Seattle for the first half of this year. So who gets the credit? Is it law enforcement getting the job done? Is it investments in human services and prevention? Or is it these somewhat mysterious ups and downs of national trends that are really driving the changes in the crime rates? So this is a conversation that's reignited this week, thanks largely to a column by Danny Westneat in the Seattle Times. He noted that homicides in the city are down by more than 40% compared with the first half of last year. And that could complicate some of those familiar narratives that we have been hearing from politicians. Maleeha, what do you make of this? How does the plunging crime rate, does it seem like a real thing? Is this long enough to sort of actually draw conclusions? And what does this say about our politics?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I came to Seattle in 2021, and I think that was a really fraught time for the country and especially for the city. We were just coming off the tail end of the protests in 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And I think Westneat speaks to that in particular. We were dealing with a drug epidemic. We were dealing with the pandemic, gun sales. So it seems like all of those factors have potentially settled down a little bit. It's hard to say. And I think crime in particular can be really relative. I think it's easy to look at Seattle and say it's more crime ridden than another city, but it's just relative to the trends in any particular place.
Yeah. Rob McKenna, I mean, how much of the crime rate is a reflection of local policies and enforcement policies and priorities and so on? And how much of it comes from these deeper national trends that are kind of hard to parse?
Yeah, it's hard to see how local policies would have made the biggest difference because we have so many fewer police than we did not that many years ago. They're really under resourced. But it's possible that they've reprioritized resources and tried to really put a focus on violent crime, which would be good. It's what people worry the most about. Taking officers off of other kinds of cases like burglaries, other kinds of property crime, fraud, etc., which is very hard to get investigated these days and prosecuted. I think, though, that we're probably seeing a demographic trend as much as anything. And this is why the last peak we had for murders in Seattle was in 1994. There's a lot of evidence that violent crime began to decline nationally because the number of young men of the age most likely to commit these crimes was shrinking. There were just fewer of them. The end of the baby boom, right? The baby boom echo also ending. So I'm guessing that those bigger trends has as much to do with it as anything involving law enforcement priorities.
Yeah. Ron Davis, this is always a perennial issue for local voters, and yet we're seeing that maybe the levers over which one can actually impact the crime rates are not always local levers.
It's complicated. So, yeah, I mean, the causes of crime are many, and there are levers we have to pull that might affect how we average compared to other places that are similarly situated. But it's that are similarly situated that fills in the sort of blanks for like the national trends, right? And so, interestingly, there was a period of time when crime was up and the number of police were down, and it was a very expedient story to tell politically, like, whatever the causes of the one were the cause of the other, and then oops, that's diverged now. Oh, that's super embarrassing. I think the trick here, having experienced this as a candidate, I totally understand why local folks might be thinking about local conditions as a driver. But I found that when I was in forums being asked questions by media, that there was never an acknowledgement, say, of the local shortage of officers available for hire around the country, or some of the cities that had actually almost similar declines as ours, like Memphis or Oklahoma City. And so I think it's easy to put our heads down, but I also think it's often opportunistic to put our heads down. I would like to note an interesting thing about this trend that I was looking back at it. we'd gone through a pandemic spike, and then we were doing a kind of classic regression to the mean. It was starting to dive in 2021. It dove a whole bunch, both homicide and rape. And right after 2021, and of course, remember, 2019 is peak of, 2019, 2020 is sort of peak progressive whatever, right, happening on the council. 2021, end of 2021, Harrell, Nelson, and Davidson, they come into power, and guess what? We were moving with the nation, coming back down, boop, we turn right back around. We start heading up, up, up. We spend 2 years going up. We come down a little bit in 2024. And so, while nationally since 2021, crime is like homicides are down, I think like 15%. Ours are still up a net of 23%. So I did a little math. That's 59 dead people that didn't need to be there. Our rape rates are still up 15%. And so, is our Harold, Davidson, and Nelson the cause of that? I don't know. I certainly think that politicians often get in trouble when they're caught holding the bag, and we've certainly seen a lot of failures of leadership at SPD and things like that out of the city. So how will voters respond to that? I don't know, except to say that it's almost always one of the top three issues when they get polled: housing, homelessness, and crime.
We're entering a whole new political cycle here locally. I mean, have you seen evidence that candidates are talking about this, that they're staking out positions related to crime and trying to use it as an issue that they can gain some leverage on? Or is this something that people don't quite know what to make of this time around?
The salience of the issue has dropped. There is a set of folks who have tended to benefit from mayhem and crime narratives. So, not all Republicans, but say Republicans in other places, or more conservative Democrats here. And you see this actually, say, with the Cuomo-Zamdami race, right? A lot of focus on it. And, and all these people wanted to defund the police. And that was really powerful as a narrative a couple of years ago. And it seems to be a losing narrative now. People seem to have more energy worried about the lawlessness of the Trump administration or cost inflation. It's a little unclear because that, is New York an outlier? Are those candidates outliers? I don't know. But it does seem to be losing some of its luster as a topic du jour.
Yeah, Maleeha, it seems to me like my sense is that people's general perceptions of the severity of crime at any given time does not have a lot of connection to the actual stats and trends and so on. It's really a vibes thing, and it has to do with the messages that they're getting from the media and from their political leadership, right? I mean, do you see that there is much of a connection between the reality and the perceptions here?
Yeah, I mean, I think even when we're talking about some of these other subjects today, like Denny Blaine, like the backdrop or the kind of immediate concern around it is crime. But then beneath that, there are a lot of layers of classism and queer spaces. Like, I think crime is kind of this blanket term that we use when we're talking about a bigger issue at hand. And I think Seattle sometimes gets slapped with the narrative that it's particularly crime-ridden. I remember I was covering a GOP election night event in Bellevue last year. And one of the people I spoke to said, you look at Seattle and Bellevue, you cross the bridge and the graffiti starts and the drug use starts. And I think sometimes Seattle's narrative as a crime-ridden place is largely in part, it's juxtaposed with other cities. I think it just depends on where you're coming from and your perspective.
Well, I'm just curious from our previously chief law enforcement elected official in our state of Washington, Rob McKenna. What do you make of the difference between perception and reality when it comes to the prevalence of crime and whether it's going in the right or wrong direction?
Well, as Ron noted, when he talked to voters, crime is still one of the top three issues they're concerned about. And it doesn't mean that they feel unsafe all the time, but it probably means they've noticed an increase in crime. It feels less safe. And in politics, we often say perception is reality because it's what informs people's votes. So they feel like there's more crime. There is evidence that there's more crime now than there was 10 years ago, for example. A 6-month downturn in the homicide rate is welcome, but it's a 6-month downturn. So we have to see what happens. And as Ron pointed out, other categories of violent crime have not dropped as much. And we are still less safe than many other big cities. More cops isn't the only solution by any means, but we are under-policed. I mean, I don't know how many times you guys have been to Boston, but they have much lower crime there than we do, and they have twice as many officers. Now, I'm not saying we need to double the number of officers, but we do need more than we have now because there is a distinct, not just correlation, but causation. Because if you don't have enough officers, you just can't respond to crimes as frequently or as many of the crimes. When you don't respond to a crime, the person committing it, and keep in mind that a disproportionate amount of crime is committed by a small number of people who do it over and over and over again. This is something that the broken window theory was an idea for a long time, but now people are realizing actually it's a small subset of people who are committing most of the crime. And if they don't think they're going to get caught because there aren't enough cops to investigate, they'll keep doing it. And so we certainly see that with with burglaries, for example, and other kinds of property crime, theft. They just don't feel like there's any real risk of them being caught and prosecuted. So number of cops is an issue. It depends on where you live, right? Some neighborhoods more concerned about than others. That's a factor. And we've got a short-term data trend. We ought to see where it goes in the next 6 to 12 months.
Can I just add one thing about Boston as a former resident of that area? Massachusetts and Boston are also probably the biggest investors in crime prevention strategies around the country.
Right.
And it's probably worth noting that the Boston Police Department's budget is about the same as ours.
Wow. So crime,
even though they have more officers, that's really interesting.
We
That
spend a
bears
lot on overtime.
Got it. Okay.
There you have it.
There you go.
We're talking with Ron Davis, Rob McKenna, and Maleeha Syed on this week's Week in Review. We'll be back in just a couple of moments with some more stories that we are looking at from this week. But first, we need to take a moment to give you an update on an existential threat to public radio and public media more generally. Reminding folks that last night Congress voted to end all federal funding for public media, and that is going to cost KUOW alone about $1.4 million each year. We are asking folks to help step into the breach and make up that difference. People have been responding really just in droves. It's been absolutely fantastic and enormously heartening to all of us to see this. We have just crossed $600,000 in donations, which is absolutely incredible. We are trying to raise $1.4 million annually, and we have, thanks to the generosity of some of our core supporters, we have a matching fund set up. So every donation that you're going to make today will be matched dollar for dollar up to $1.4 million. Paige Browning, newscaster queen extraordinaire. This is some pretty great progress that we've seen already.
Yeah, it's been I used the word overwhelm earlier, and it's that and amazing to hear from all of you who have given today. We just crossed $607,000 raised by you, people that went to our website, KUOW.org. And that's on top of the very generous gift we got from a group of donors of $700,000. So we're on our way to making up the gap for this year, and we do it with your support. Give now to join people who already gave, like Ed, Julia, Nancy in Seattle, Drew in Seattle, who wrote us and said, "I believe in and appreciate the work you do. Unbiased, intelligent, fact-based news is the backbone of our constitutional rights and freedom." He says, "May you continue to help truth find light." And Dana in Seattle said, "KUOW is reliable, accurate, and informative with the side of humor." We do offer that, Gabriel. And Dana said this donation today is made in memory of her father, Professor Ben W. Twite. And we also heard from Joy in Bellingham, people from all over the region. Thank you. You're next to give, KUOW.org.
Choose the level of giving that makes sense for you. It's really important, though, if you're able to give on a sustaining basis. As we mentioned, we have made enormous progress already today just in filling this gap for this year. But the important thing is that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was an annual funder. It was our biggest single sustaining donor here at KUOW. So this isn't just a this year problem. This is a from now on problem. We need to fundamentally shift to a 100% listener and local organization supported news organization here at KUOW. We need your help to do that. If you have already given, consider an extra little gift. If you've given a one-time gift in the past, consider turning that into a sustaining gift. Mm-hmm. The most important thing, though, is that you give something. Send that message that this is an important service that you rely on. It's something that you care about. It makes a big difference in your life. It's part of your routine. And it's not something that you're willing to just see taken away without, standing up to fight for it. Go to KUOW.org.
Yeah, the clawback of funding has made me feel a little bit like Oscar the Grouch today, which is the GIF I've been using in our internal Slack channels. But the good news is our community's collective support has always been our backbone. And that cannot be voted away because you're the one that decides to make your gift. It's up to you and you alone. Congress can't vote that away. We will get through this moment because our biggest asset is and has always been you, our listener, and we are going to keep providing news for you. So give right now. Go to KUOW.org.
Thank you so much to everybody who's given, including Justin, who wrote that KUOW is my main news outlet. I wish I could give more. Well, Justin, thank you so much for giving what you can. And that's what this model is all about. You give what you can. And if you can give a little bit more in order to, help cover the costs for folks who maybe aren't in a position to give, that is part of our sort of culture of responsibility too. So help us raise this $1.4 million to make up for the withdrawn federal support. Go to KUOW.org and make your gift now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books, presenting Jeopardy host Ken Jennings on Thursday, July 31st at 7 p.m. Tickets and more information is available at thirdplacebooks.com.
And from Cambium Landscape. Since 1998, working with clients' tastes and home architecture to create landscapes that complement their outdoor lifestyles, whether relaxing in the spa, dining al fresco, or playing pickleball. Portfolio and more at cambiumlandscape.com.
It's Week in Review on KUOW. I'm Gabriel Spitzer. I'm here today with political consultant Ron Davis, former Attorney General Rob McKenna, and KUOW producer Maleeha Syed. Well, it ain't exactly Christmas in July, unless you are a huge infrastructure nerd, in which case, respect. This weekend marks the start of a huge construction project that will shut down a stretch of I-5 through downtown Seattle. All the northbound lanes between I-90 and the U District will close this weekend. Some of those lanes are going to reopen on Monday morning, but the road work will continue through mid-August. Then we'll have another full weekend closure. It's all about addressing what experts say is the chronically neglected Ship Canal Bridge. So this is work that's needed in the long run, but it's likely to cause some suffering in the short run. So I was curious from our panelists, is this a route you take on the weekends? Is it something that you're going to have to plan around and make adjustments for? Rob McKenna?
So we live up near Kenmore, and we'll either come down 405 and across the bridge to downtown, or we'll come around the north end of the lake and come down. So that's the route I took to get here today for the show, and it's the middle of the day, and it was slammed from Shoreline all the way to downtown as far as I could see. And unfortunately, I could get off at the U District. So, last weekend, we needed to go to downtown Bellevue, and southbound 405 was closed. And it just wrecked all the north-south arterials, people trying to find alternative routes. So in the roughly 45 minutes it took us to go, 6 miles to get to downtown Bellevue, we had lots of time to talk about this and the closure of I-5 this weekend. And what we concluded, my wife and I, was that you can't just skip the I-5 corridor itself. Every north-sound travel route is going to be impacted. For example, this weekend, 405 is going to be wrecked in both directions because I-5 is closed. So the best advice I have is limit your travels to east-west, or stay home, or leave the area. Leave the area now. Don't, right.
I will just point out, because I think this often gets lost, but the express lanes, the northbound express lanes, will be open. So it will be possible to get north on I-5, but obviously it's going to be a lot of traffic funneled onto a very narrow course. Ron Davis, what are your thoughts about this? Is this something that's going to hit you right in the gas tank?
Well, I would just say I do use that spot with some frequency. I live in Ravenna, just north of it. I was able to walk here today, right? I'm that close. I would also say the other option is to take transit or get on a bike or walk somewhere, and that is very doable here in the city. In terms of this, we know generally from previous sort of predicted Carmageddons that they typically don't materialize because people adapt their behaviors. On the other hand, this is fairly one-off. It's not for a long chronic period. So, if people don't know, it could get ugly this time.
If you have to go to the airport, from the north, or you better be planning for this, right?
Yeah, I'd be going 520 right to 405 exactly, or down 99, and I'm sure, especially if people.
What you want to do is go over the mountains.
Right. Whereas if you were to
right
close
at
this for a
Idaho.
year,
Yeah.
you would start to see major traffic adjustments after a month or two. But yeah, this is so spotty. It's hard to know exactly how it will go.
Are the express lanes going to be running in both directions this weekend, or
The express lanes will be northbound only. So that's going to cause some issues in the morning, especially for southbound drivers, because they won't have the express lane options. They'll all have to go stay on the main line. So there you have it. Maleeha, what are your plans? You got any sort of?
No big plans. Yeah, I'm going to be avoiding the roads. It's funny, I don't take this route often, but yesterday I was coming back from Eastlake and it just totally redirected me. And I was trying to get on the ramp to I-5 and it just completely put me on the bridge. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that I was kind of thinking about is how we disseminate news. I think everyone knows this is going to hit now, but like, there's no universal place to find this information. So if you're just happening upon it, I don't know what you do.
Well, we were talking about some of these earlier predicted Carmageddons not necessarily living up to their apocalyptic projections. And my guess is that at least part of that is that people listened to the to the warnings, right? And people adjusted their behavior. And, I think we've got a pretty sort of civically conscious, aware population here in Seattle. I'm wondering if you think that has changed at all. I mean, we've got the fragmentation of the communications channels, but also, we've had a lot of growth. We've had some changes in our kind of car culture here. I don't know. Could this be different?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I get a lot of my information on social media, and I think a lot of other people do too. News has been covering it a lot, but I'm just thinking of someone who's not on their phone all the time. If you're just driving and you're suddenly redirected, kind of adapting to that. And there's a lot of festivals this weekend. I think that's going to naturally affect the flow of traffic too. So
that's a really good point. The block party,
Yes.
the Capitol Hill block party, and other things.
Yeah, big things.
Rob McKenna, do you think that things have changed either culturally or, we're thinking about technology. Maleeha's talking about getting redirected by your phone app. This is not something that we all had 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that does help, absolutely, in terms of finding alternative routes. And I think things have changed, I wouldn't say culturally, but there's just there are more people here, right? I remember for years, Seattle never seemed to get above about 590,000 population, and it's just, what are we over, 700,000 now?
800,000.
800,000.
Yeah.
So just a lot more folks here. And, there isn't that much more pavement to and even with transit options, it's just really tougher to get around. And even the light rail line can be really jammed if there's an event. So it's just more challenging. You have to be more patient than ever. You have to plan more than ever, and you have to be a little bit strategic about when you choose to travel and what routes you take.
All things that
adapt.
are not my strong suit.
Same.
I recently repaired the air conditioner in one of our vehicles, and holy cow, that was the best money I've ever spent. Getting stuck in traffic in the heat is
worst.
just
the worst.
misery. Yeah. Ron, you got AC in your own cars?
I do, but I was just going to say, there was a period, I think 2015 through 2019, when we were growing 15, 20, 25,000 people a year, and there was no more traffic on I-5. It has since, then it dropped during the pandemic, and it spiked since. I don't know what the net is now, but there is a way to shift trips, but it takes real deliberate action.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron Davis, Rob McKenna, Maleeha Syed. We are going to be continuing this conversation with some things that made us smile this week in just a few minutes. But first, we're going to take a quick break and update folks on this very urgent ask that we have for people today to help us make up for the withdrawn federal funding for public media. You're listening to KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. I'm Gabriel Spitzer. I'm here with Paige Browning, and we are reminding folks that last night, the U.S. Congress voted to withdraw funding for public media. That cuts $1.4 million out of KUOW's budget. The way that we need to make that up is for folks to step forward and make a contribution. Anybody who has been a longtime listener or even a brand new listener, anybody who relies on this service, it's now up to you to make sure that it is sustained and that it remains strong and vibrant. So go to KUOW.org and make a gift.
I have some great news. So KUOW was not about to be caught flat-footed. We planned for this in case this did happen in Congress. And so we did the math that $1.4 million, that means half of that is $700,000. A group of generous donors already pledged $700,000. That means listeners today have to do the other $700,000. That makes up the math of what we're missing for a year.
All right, I think I'm following you.
Yes, you're following. We're almost at that number. So today, our listeners, have raised $627,000. It's amazing. And when you're giving right now, your donation will still be doubled thanks to those generous donors that I mentioned. Joy in Bellingham gave. She wrote, "This is one of our main sources of quality and trustworthy news, and it's an old friend for both of us as we've listened for decades. Join Joy and 2,200 other people who've supported our station today. Give at KUOW.org.
My friends, that is so cool.
Yes.
I'm just so grateful to our audience. It's just one of the best audiences in the country for public radio, because
it is.
You know that, when it's time to step up, that you'll step up. And we're just incredibly grateful to people who have given, including people like Jack and Ricky in Seattle. They wrote that they are upping their monthly donation from $30 to $40 a month to help support the wonderful and important work that we do. It's a fantastic idea if you have been a longtime donor, a monthly donor, a sustainer. If you want to add a little bit to your monthly donations, that goes a long way to making up this $1.4 million hole that just opened up overnight. Thanks a lot also to Edward in Seattle, who says, "I depend on KUOW to provide us with objective, fact-based reporting about our community and our world. And I also enjoy programs like from NPR, like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, The Puzzle, and Marketplace." It's such a eclectic slate of stuff that comes your way from KUOW. I think my life would be a lot poorer without it. And that's just a really good indication that it's time for me to step up. It's time for all of us to step up, because the federal government has opted to pull back. So that means that we need to step into the breach. Go to KUOW.org and you'll have your donation today matched dollar for dollar.
Yeah, I mean, we make Week in Review. We make Sound Politics. We made Spectacular Specimens. We do Seattle Eats. So many things, not to mention All Things Considered, Morning Edition, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. But one little factoid to keep in your mind is 5% of KUOW's funding came from the CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's gone. But the community has always been our backbone. And as we said before, Congress cannot vote that away. So you can give right now at KUOW.org.
That's right. Go to KUOW.org. And just to recap, Congress has voted to end all funding for public media, creating an unprecedented threat to the very existence of public media outlets across the country. All the donations to KUOW will be matched up to $700,000. And when we reach our goal, we will get right back to regular programming. Thank you, everyone who has supported us, and we'll be back in just a moment. I guess that moment is now. Hey, welcome back. Well, we are back now with our panel here, Ron Davis, Rob McKenna, Maleeha Syed, and we are going to be taking time for our weekly ritual, probably an important one to observe this week, where we are just reflecting on something that made us smile. So I would like to ask each of our panelists to let us know something that made you happy this week. Maleeha, let's start with you.
Yes, I, on Wednesday, was walking in Cap Hill, and I got to see in person the rap mural. And it's, for context, the battleground for this public rap mural that keeps going up and getting painted over. And it was cool to see it in person. It was like the Mona Lisa. Smaller. Yeah.
I was going to say, it looks smaller.
Smaller than pictures. Yeah.
Was it rat or rap?
Rat.
Oh, okay.
Hot rat summer is upon us. Yeah.
Very good.
There's a lot of layers there. I
Layered.
get it.
Yeah.
Rob McKenna, how about you? What makes you smile?
Well, Cal Raleigh home run derby, and just to drill down on that, the fact he was there with his dad, who was throwing the pitches, and his brother, who was catching behind the plate, his little brother, 15 years old. That was so heartwarming. The only thing that could have made it better is if he'd had a golden retriever sitting there. I was like, it was just so touching, and I think it's the part of that a lot of people are talking about, even more than the fact that he won the derby.
Go Big Dumper. All right, Ron Davis, what made you smile this week?
I was walking in Ravenna Park last night. I came out of the woods into Cowan Park. There were like 60 people playing volleyball. There were kids on the play structures. There were people laying in the grass, and there was this band, pan, flute. I don't even remember all the stuff. It was just
was it
just so idyllic. idyllic, just such a wonderful reminder of what it is to live together in community in such a beautiful place. And then one last thing, a celebration of life I got to attend this week for my wife's 98-year-old grandfather. He filmed parts of the Nuremberg trials, Dresden right after the firebombing. He was in the army as a photographer. He saw some really horrific stuff, Auschwitz, and he went on and built a family, 5 kids, and there were like 40 of us there, and just up in the North Cascades spreading ashes. And it was just such a testament to love and a life well lived.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what perspective that lends to everything. Well, just very briefly, I'll say for me, it was FaceTiming with my teenager who is doing a little homestay in Mexico and finding out that they are like in love with their host family, which has been so sweet. This is a really big adventure for them. And this is a kid that I wasn't sure, knew how to brush their own teeth without parental involvement. So this has been a fantastic development. Hooray for adolescent brain development. All right, that's been Week in Review. Thank you so much, Maleeha Syed, Ron Davis, and Rob McKenna. Producer Kevin Kniested, Kathy Faulkner on the board, Juan Pablo Chiquisa, and Hans Tweit. I'm Gabriel Spitzer.
A Brazilian judge has ordered the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, to wear a monitoring device and put him under curfew to stop him fleeing the country while on trial. Police have raided Mr. Bolsonaro's home and party headquarters. They accuse him of engaging in a campaign to persuade the U.S. to interfere in his trial. He's been charged with plotting a coup to prevent his successor from taking office. He denies any wrongdoing and said the government